Sonic Labyrinth is one of the worst classic Sonic games ever. That's not an opinion, it's a fact. I know no one who actually likes this game. If you like this game, you either like it because it's so horrible that you can get a laugh out of it, or you're blind when it comes to classic Sonic games and like every single thing in that time period, or you just want to be contrary to what I'm saying just to be contrary. Whatever the case is, you can't deny its lack of worth compared to all the other games of that era and games of all the other eras. But I'm not here to beat it into the ground shamelessly. I'm here to explore this train wreck and find out why it's so terrible, and if I was to remake it, how I would fix it into a not so terrible game. And if you haven't guessed it yet, this video is going to be based on my opinions and what I would have liked to see in this game. So don't get super bent out of shape if I don't make a specific correction to something you would like corrected, okay? Another disclaimer, I'm more of a story-centric guy when it comes to video games. Sure, the gameplay needs a lot of work, but I'm gonna be honest, it's not my thing to tear apart the physics or mechanics or gameplay elements of a game. I will cover gameplay in this series, but I won't go deep into it like I will with the other aspects of the game. Sorry if you were expecting a thorough deconstruction of the gameplay, but I'd recommend going to a different video for that. Anyways, that's enough preambles. Let's start fixing what's broken. Sonic Labyrinth. First off, we have to ask the most important question of all. Why? Just why? Why does this game exist? Well, that's easy. Sonic the Hedgehog is all about speed, so what happens when you take that away from him? This game is basically an experiment on Sonic, not just his gameplay, but his personality, his worth, his character as a whole. It's like if you take Superman's powers away, what do you have left? Is he still the same person, or does he become something else? Do the powers make the man, or does the man make the powers? It's a classic trope in media, and there's various ways of doing this experiment. This game is supposed to be that experiment for Sonic, and that's a fine premise for this game. However, this has to be set up properly in-game, so you can't just throw the player into this experiment with nothing easing them in. We aren't Sonic, we're not supposed to be suffering from the second we press start. Let's have a level that misleads the player for our first stage. Instead of starting in the labyrinth, let's play as Sonic making his way across a picturesque landscape, fighting Badniks as usual, going fast, and feeling great. There's no reason this couldn't be done because Sonic Labyrinth came out in 1995, a full year after Sonic Triple Trouble, and a month after Tails Adventure. Both of these games were on the same system, the Game Gear, and Tails Adventure was even in production at the same time as Sonic Labyrinth. So it would have been perfect to have gameplay similar to one or both of those games. Then we can have a boss at the end of the first zone. Here we're using a very common but effective story element, breaking the routine. Having a break from the norm is basically the start of the real story. Sonic 1's break from the norm is Sonic waking up to see that all of his friends and family have been roboticized. Sonic 2's break from the norm is Sonic meeting Tails, creating a new spin on the established order of not only the story, but the entire template of Sonic games easily creates intrigue and excitement. Plus, this provides seasoned players with a warning that things are different from the other games, preparing them for the turn the game will take later. And the new players are quickly introduced to the normal mechanics and template of a Game Gear Sonic game and gives them a nice test of their abilities in the form of a boss battle. After the boss battle, we can have a short cutscene. I'm talking Sonic 3 level of short cutscene, showing Dr. Robotnik catching Sonic off guard. He shoots him with a kinetic dampener, pulling the abnormal amount of kinetic energy Sonic can produce away from him, thus taking away his super speed and rendering him a normal Hedgehog. Now you may have noticed, I didn't mention the slowdown boots that Robotnik uses to take Sonic's super speed away in the original game. Well, buckle your seatbelts because you'll never guess why I didn't mention those. It's because they're stupid. They're stupid, so I'm scrapping them. So zap zap, Sonic's got no super speed. But what could be fun is if this is a gradual change. Like after Robotnik zaps him, he flies to the end of the second act of this zone, and as the player plays through the level, they gradually get slower and slower. There's this horrible realization as they play that Sonic is losing his powers, but using his spin jump and spin dash at normal speed can still damage enemies, but with the loss of his super speed comes a loss in power for the spin dash and the spin jump. Now, it takes 2 or 3 attacks to destroy enemies instead of the normal one-hit KO. This increases the difficulty, but not in a cheap or boring way. At the beginning of the level, the enemies are defeated like usual, but as progress is made, the enemies need 2 attacks to be defeated, then 3 attacks. Now the player is taking notice that something definitely isn't right. Finally, we get to the boss from the first act, this time without speed. The player has played through an entire level with their power decreasing, so they should have adapted enough to at least survive this boss fight. But for the story's purpose, the player cannot defeat Dr. Robotnik in the boss mech. This is more of a fight for survival, and maybe at the 2-minute mark of the battle, another short cutscene can play. Sonic gets hit by the mech and falls over, while Dr. Robotnik laughs and captures him, carrying him off screen while we fade to black. And as we fade back in, we see Sonic in a completely different environment from the lush environment he was just defeated in. Now we have broken the normal way of doing things again, but we started from a point of normalcy, so this shift isn't so sudden that it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Next, we can have Dr. Robotnik announce that Sonic is in his egg labyrinth or something, and then he can tell Sonic that he's going to toy with him to his heart's content until Sonic dies. Or he cannot say that since this is the classic era. It doesn't really matter to me. Then the next improvement will be introduced, deadly traps. I'll get into the nitty-gritty of this in the setting part of this video series, but basically, the original traps are nothing short of lame. So we're cranking those up to 11. I'm talking classic Mega Man level of death traps. I realize this is a short game and it was meant to be short, so I'm just going to say 2 more things and we're done with this part. I'm introducing a gameplay element that I'll elaborate on later, the ability to use the Badnik parts from the previous acts to traverse through levels. This will be important story-wise because it shows us how adaptable Sonic is and how much perseverance he has. Now the final boss has to be big. It has to be the result of Dr. Robotnik having enough of Sonic surviving his brilliant labyrinth and throwing out the kid's gloves to finally end it. All of the skills, equipment, and experience Sonic and the player has gathered through the game can be culminated in this final fight. Then, upon the final boss's defeat, Sonic finds the kinetic dampener that Robotnik used on him in the beginning and smashes it. The energy that was stored in the machine is freed and it surrounds Sonic, and boom, Sonic's super speed is restored. And once his speed is back, then we can have that ultimate secret final boss, which would be the welcomed return of classic Sonic boss battles and gameplay. This, again, is not a new concept. The ultimate final boss for every major game in the classic era features Sonic going super and having a balls-to-the-wall final showdown as he's whipping around with superpowers. This is the same thing, only instead of Super Sonic, we're just returning to normal super speed Sonic. This ultimate final boss is going to be the sweet and justified reward for playing through the whole game as a slow Sonic. This is going to be your victory lap as the player. You started from the top, got knocked to the bottom, fought your way back up, and finally you get to be on top again. And you get your revenge on Dr. Robotnik for taking your most valued skill, your super speed. Then, when the game is over, you feel like Sonic has just proven himself to the world that he's a hero. Not because he's fast, but because he deserves to be fast. He's got a hero's heart and a hero's spirit. The powers are his reward for being worthy of possessing them. And the player can kind of feel that for themselves as well. A little. Maybe. I don't know, at least they won't be bored or irritated for playing this game because it had no weight on anything. You know, kind of like the original game. Next, let's look at the whole isometric view idea. This is annoying for me. I mean, I understand that it needs to be there. That's the gimmick of the game. But I think there's a better way to implement it. How about we treat this isometric view like a special stage? We're just going to break up this gimmick with something safe that we know fans will enjoy playing. Let's make the isometric stuff the werehog parts of this game and fit in some awesome classic platforming. So there, we can have our cake and eat it too. It's surprising to admit this, but there is a Sonic game that does this whole isometric death trap Maze of Doom thing exactly like I think this game should have, and that's SegaSonic the Hedgehog. If Sonic Labyrinth could have at least taken design choices from SegaSonic the Hedgehog, then everything about this game would have gone up several levels in quality. So we can do the weird isometric level thing, but let's do it in a less bland way. I mean, look at these levels. How lame are these levels? Did anyone actually design these, or were they default isometric things the computer guys put on Sega's computers? I mean, where's the pizzazz, the spectacle, the artistic nature of it? If you look at all the mechanical levels of the classic Sonic games, and you look at this sad, pathetic garbage of a level, you can see no one gave a crap in this game. No one put any ounce of effort into the level design. You know what happened? Someone said, let's do isometric levels, guys. And everyone said, so just one, right? One level? That's a game, right? Just one level over and over. That's good enough, right? It basically changed the color of the tiles and slightly altered the placement of the tiles, and that's it. That is it. And you know what? That's not good enough. Whatever your problems with Sonic 3D Blast, the level design is a whole lot better than Sonic Labyrinth. And I know one of them is on the Saturn/Genesis and one of them is on the Game Gear, so the one on Saturn/Genesis is going to look better by comparison. But you want to know something? I can name 12 games that look better than Sonic Labyrinth, and they came out before 1995. Oh, what, you don't believe me? Time for you to learn something, kiddies. 3, 2, 1, go! Number 1, Airborne Ranger, 1988, created by Microprose Software Inc. for the Amiga, Amstrad CPC, Atari ST, Commodore 64, and the ZX Spectrum. Notice the texture and variety of locations for the player to traverse. Number 2, Battle Bugs, 1994, created by Pixie Inc. and published by Sierra Online Inc. for the DOS, Microsoft Windows, MS-DOS, PlayStation, and IBM PC. I like the different colors and shapes used to make everything pop, and the levels all have concepts that they run with. Number 3, Cadaver, 1990, created by the Bitmap Brothers and published by ImageWorks for the Amiga, Atari ST, MS-DOS, Acorn Archimedes, and Amiga OS. Unlike the previous two entries, this game has a pretty neat use of light as well as really distinctive textures. Number 4, Cannon Fodder, 1994, created by Sensible Software Ltd. and published by Virgin Interactive Entertainment for the Amiga, DOS, Microsoft Windows, Amiga OS, IBM PC, and Macintosh operating systems. The use of color is grounded and nicely done. Number 5, Conquest of Japan, 1992, created by Impressions Games for the Amiga, Atari ST, and DOS. The texture and colors are bare minimum, but it still looks better than Sonic Labyrinth because the characters are smaller, which gives the player more level to see, and that's always good. Number 6, Contraption Zack, 1992, created by Presage, is it Presage? Okay. Created by Presage Software Inc. and published by Mindscape Inc. for the DOS, Amiga, and Amiga OS. Sorry, let me just try that over again. Number 6, Contraption Zack, 1992, created by Presage... I don't know that word. Here we go. Number 6, Contraption Zack, 1992, created by Presage Software Inc. and published by Mindscape Inc. for the DOS, Amiga, and Amiga OS. This one is probably the most terrible of all of them, but there's still something to be said for the layout of all the levels. Yes, the graphics look pretty bad, and it looks like the locations are just floating in a black void. However, these are all mechanical locations that have a theme and a layout that differentiates them from each other. So technically, it's still better than Sonic Labyrinth. Number 7, Dark Legions, 1994, created by Silicon Knights and published by Strategic Simulations for the DOS, MS-DOS. Do I even need to say anything at this point? Themes, colors, textures, all good. Number 8, Darklands, 1992, created by Microprose Software Inc. for Microsoft Windows, DOS, MS-DOS, Linux, and Macintosh operating systems. Yes to everything, especially the boss battle locations and the use of light and shadow for the levels. Number 9, Desert Strike, Return of the Gulf, 1994, created by Electronic Arts Inc. and published by Gremlin Interactive Ltd. for the Amiga, MS-DOS, Mac OS, Lynx, Game Boy, Super NES, Genesis, and get this, the Sega Game Gear. Look at the wide, expansive levels and the pretty okay colors. The textures are almost non-existent, but with such a large level to explore, who even cares at this point? And this proves that all of the previous games that were limited to computers or other platforms separate from the Game Gear can still be applied to the Game Gear system. Number 10, Dusk of the Gods, 1991, created by Event Horizon Software Inc. and published by Interstel for the DOS and the MS-DOS. Graphics and textures are nothing to write home about, but there is a ton going on conceptually. Look at all the crazy creative things going on. And as far as color, well, there's a freaking rainbow coming out of the ground and shooting across space, so there you have it. Number 11, The Four Crystals of Trezir, 1992, created by Mindscape Inc. for the Amiga, Atari, ST, and DOS. The textures and graphics are pushed to the limit in this, and conceptually, there's really interesting stuff going on. I mean, there's a freaking dragon reading the paper next to a giant man purse. Case closed. And finally, number 12, Heimdall 2, Into the Hall of Worlds, 1994, created by Core Design for the Amiga, DOS, MS-DOS, and Amiga OS. This one does literally everything right, but most notably for me is the color and theme of each level, and the sheer breadth of variety and style everywhere in the game. Whew, that was a lot. These games have themes, environmental concepts, atmosphere, texture, interesting level layouts, and a good use of color and light. And all of these games came out between 1988 and 1994. This game that came out in November of 1995 has none of these things. So please understand, Sonic Labyrinth could have been as good looking and well designed as any of these games. Possibly better, because none of these games are perfect. They have flaws that have to be improved on, and have been improved on, as new games took their places. Basically what I'm saying is, Sonic Labyrinth doesn't look like hot garbage because the 90s wasn't a time where good-looking isometric games existed. It looks like hot garbage because no one making it gave a crap and phoned it in hard. So how about we use effort into making some interesting isometric levels? How about we make them based off of any mechanical or electrical device or things like that we can think of? So we can have an automobile level where everything looks like we're under the hood of a car and we have to get from one end to the other. Light bulbs. Let's have a light bulb level where everything is just a series of weird light bulbs and electrical sockets and junk. That sounds cool. How about a telephone level? You know, with phone cords everywhere, the old dial wheels you have to turn in order to type a phone number out. Let's break open an old phone and see if we can arrange the wires into something fun for the player to interact with. Why stop at 90s phones though? Why not incorporate those super old phones with the talkie piece and the listening piece? Let's throw in some phone booth-esque designs and some change slots or something. Speaking of change slots, let's have a vending machine level. That's right, a vending machine level. I'm talking glass cases with junk food being launched out of coils. I'm talking buttons you have to push in order to have certain things fall away so you can move forward in the level. Let's have a bunch of silly snacks that only Robotnik would like, so break out all the food puns that could apply to him and his robots. And let's just go to town on it. Speaking of robots, wouldn't it be neat to be inside of a Badnik for a level? Like, as the player goes, we can see the different parts of the Badnik. Say if it was a buzz bomber, the player could travel up the wings and all the way down to the stinger, and maybe even walk around the inside of its head. That sounds like fun. Hey, look at that. I just presented really interesting level concepts that could easily be utilized in this game. And, as a bonus, none of these level concepts have ever been used in any Sonic game to date. So even if the textures, colors, use of light, and level layouts don't change, these levels can still be, at the very least, interesting and memorable from concept alone. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I am in no way, shape, or form a gameplay expert. I'm a story guy through and through. I don't really know how to articulate the mechanics of player interaction, controls, physics, and all that stuff. But I do have some ideas that could make this game a lot more interesting and fun, even if I don't know the express details of how to implement each idea. So here goes. For the first level, as I said previously, it should play like a regular classic era 8-bit game. Think Sonic Triple Trouble's Playstyle. That's what I'm aiming for with this. However, after the first boss fight when Sonic is zapped with the kinetic dampener, the player's speed and power will decrease as they go through the second act and fight the boss again. Then for the next level where we start in the Labyrinth, the player should have time to adjust to the new isometric view, with weak enemies to defeat and, this is important, traps. All the other death mazes and labyrinths of other media have, get this, deadly traps and junk. Sonic Labyrinth has a disturbing lack of death traps.
Death trap!
There's little to no peril or danger in this game. So let's crank the traps up to 11 and add a new element to the gameplay. Salvaging destroyed Badniks and using them to traverse the maze. Each Badnik, therefore, has to be carefully designed in order to help Sonic get through the maze. For example, if Motobugs were in this game, their pincers could be used to climb walls. If Caterkillers were in this game, their bodies could be used as projectiles for Sonic to damage enemies from a distance. Things like that. And this way, we've already got a more interesting game than the original. And again, it's not like this is a new concept that is unachievable at the time of the game's creation. Tails' Adventure had several items and skills that the player could unlock or find in the levels, and an equip system that let the player use whatever tool or power-up they wanted. So we're just taking that same concept and applying it to Sonic, and the tools or power-ups from Tails' Adventure are being replaced by Badnik parts. Next, the boss battles. The bosses in this game are stupid. They're pretty freaking stupid. I can't lie to you. But once again, if we take the approach that Triple Trouble did with its bosses, as in making the fights longer and making the battle harder to win, then that would be great. And it's not like I want these bosses to be the epitome of video game bosses. I just think it would be cool to take the approach that Sonic 2 and 3 had to their bosses, you know? Most of the bosses in those games fit the theme of that level. Chemical Plant had a boss that used the chemicals to its advantage. Hydro City had a boss that used the water to its advantage, etc. So for our light bulb level, we should have an electro boss. For our automobile level, we should have a car boss, so on and so forth. And the difficulty for these bosses should be fairly high considering Sonic doesn't have his speed and strength. The player would have to use the scraps from the Badniks they've defeated to beat the boss. And after defeating the first boss, you can then use the scraps from that boss to fight through the next level all the way to the next boss. And throughout the game, you have this growing arsenal of creative weapons which you can use against the final boss. This is the same concept of Mega Man getting different power-ups when he defeats a boss, so once again, I'm not breaking new ground here. Then of course, when the player gets all of Sonic's powers back, we can return to the first level's controls and go to town on a super robot Robotnik has made. And boom, that's the end of the game. Now, I think that's a more interesting, more fun, and more memorable game than what we started with. So, mission accomplished, gang. Thanks for watching till the end. I had a lot of fun with this, despite it not having much of a story for me to jump into. Next time, though, there's going to be a heavy focus on story, which I'm so excited to tackle. Once again, this was Fixing What's Broken. I'm SAJ-Man, and I hope to see you next video.